Okay. So, am I under now? I think.
Good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait a little bit longer for a few more people to sign on. I want to thank you all for showing up for our virtual blueberry session, the first one in a series of 3. For those of you that haven't used your full name, if you're looking for pesticide points, we will need your full name on your sign-in. Otherwise, we won't know who to award the pesticide points to. While we're waiting, I just want to put a big shout out and a thanks to the chemical companies that helped sponsor some of these meetings. There's going to be some door prize draws at the end of the evening. So all the chemical companies were gracious enough to either donate prizes or gift certificates. So we'll do that from those who are registered for the meeting at the end of the night.
So I think we're going to get started. Just a few reminders before our first speaker. Please stay muted to avoid background noise. If you have a question or a comment, you can use the chat box, or there's a raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. You can use that button and we'll call on you to speak. Please try to make sure your name on Zoom is your first and last name so that we can do our points award. Most of you look like you have done that, so that's great. You will need to be present for the whole session to receive your points, and your receipts will be emailed out to you within 2 weeks. The barcode for certified crop advisor credits will be available at the end of the sessions, and these sessions will be recorded and emailed out at a later date. So our first speaker tonight is Blair Fraser. He's the Atlantic Sales Manager for BASF, and he's here to speak on Merivon and Serifel, 2 exciting new fungicides. So I will give the floor to you, Blair.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, so as Megan said, Blair Fraser. I've been with BASF now for 6 years and territory rep in Atlantic provinces, and I live in Kempton, Nova Scotia. So glad to be here on the meeting with everybody this evening. Thanks to the Agri-Mark for inviting us to participate. So, Megan, should I try to bring this up, or are you
You
gonna?
can try to share your screen. If it
I'll try that.
I can share mine.
Yeah, we'll try that. There we go.
It looks
And
like working.
yeah, and I think we need a slideshow, I believe.
Yep. Actually, at the top on the orange bar, there's a little screen to the right hand side of the save button. Yep.
Right there.
Yeah, I think that'll take you to
Start from the beginning. Yeah, there we go. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right?
Sound good on my end.
Okay, and you can see the screen. All right, we'll get going. We got a lot of ground to cover. Okay, so Merivon, we're very excited to introduce Merivon to growers this year. Merivon has been in the US now for 5 or 6 years, and we brought it to Canada this year. We're very excited. This is a great new fungicide, and so I want to talk on Merivon, and I also want to talk on Serifel, and then I'll mention Ignite and Circatus. Just touch on those briefly. So Merivon is made up of 2 actives: Xemium, which the active is fluxapyroxad, which you would know as Circatus, and also Piractostrovan, which you would know as Cabrio. So great features, both these chemistries with the Xemium. Continuous redistribution is in the waxy cuticle, keeps delivering into the tissue. It doesn't peak and drop off. It just keeps giving great residual protection, and with the Piractostrovan, more consistent disease control. So it's great disease control, and also helps in nutrient efficiency and with stress, helps with stress. So looking at these a little closer here, so Piractostrovan is ring-fast-emitted systemic. It's a quinine outside inhibitor enzyme, which affects the mitochondrial respiration, which is the energy in the cell, and improves the plant health, as I mentioned. So and through disease protection and better efficiency of nutrients, especially carbon and nitrogen. And with the Xemium, it's a highly systemic group 7. It's ring fast very rapidly, and consistent continuous control under adverse conditions. So it goes into the tissue and into the xylem and upward and outward to treat all the tissue. So Merivon is labeled for a broad range of crops, and their front row center is blueberries. That's what we're keying in on tonight. But as you can see, broad range of fruit and vegetable crops that we're registered on, and diseases that we're looking at for blueberries are leaf spot, botrytis, anthracnose, and phomopsis. So here's some side-by-sides here, just looking at a trial here that was done on these peaches, pre-harvest spray of control of peach brown rot. Now these are at 70 degrees for 6 days. So if these trays were out on the order desk on the front counter there at Tro Agrimart, they look, those Merivon ones would look as good Friday afternoon as they did Monday morning when they went out. Just the untreated looks pretty, you know, it's showing some breakdown there. Pristine, it's been a good product. It's a good product, but Merivon is just going to the next level. And now that was 2 applications of Merivon on that trial. So just looking here at cherry leaf spot, another crop, but it is leaf spot, just thought I'd throw that in. Untreated control, looking, the dark green is infection and the light green is defoliation. In the untreated check, just a lot of infection, a lot of leaf drop, and a competitive product, and then Merivon. Good control there. So Merivon, you'll still see the same excellence benefits that you've seen with Pristine over the years. That's coming from the Paraclostrobin in Merivon, and you've seen it over the years: increased yield, berry size, berry retention, and fruit that stands up better after harvest. This is some high bush blueberry results out of BC, and untreated check here, looking at a competitive product, then Circatus, and then Merivon. So yield in kilograms per hectare was up substantially with the Merivon treatment. And in this trial, there was no monolinea, and there was insignificant botrytis pressure. So leaf spot control and low bush blueberries. And this is work that was done by Dr. Percival back in 2015. And Dave's been working with this product now for the last 4 or 5 years. So just looking at the untreated here, percent incidence, and then a competitive product, and then Pristine, and then Merivon. Merivon's just like I said, that just going to that next level of better protection. So just looking at a snapshot here of the label, and diseases controlled: septoria, botrytis, anthracnose, and phomopsis twig blight. In the use rates here, and I'd recommend that 0.8 liters per hectare rate, especially with botrytis. 3 applications per season and no more than 2 back-to-back. And then if we look at the pre-harvest for Lowbush, mechanical harvest 12-hour pre-harvest and hand harvest in 1 day, and then the re-entry is 12 hours. So in general statement here, start applications prior to disease development, continue on a 7 to 14 day interval. In the case size, there's 4 by 1.62 liter jugs in a case. So I thought there might be a few strawberry growers in the audience, so just thought I'd put this in as well. Disease control are anthracnose, botrytis, and powdery mildew. Again, range of rates, but that 0.8 liters per hectare or 800 mils to the hectare rate would cover everything. And maximum application per season, again, are 3, no more than 2 back-to-back. Pre-harvest is 1 day, mechanical harvest 12 hours, re-entry, for depending on what activity you're doing, is 1 day or 12 hours. And the general statement here: start applications prior to disease development, but get Merivon on prior to 10% bloom stage, if possible. That's the best timing. In the case, again, it's the same 4 by 1.62 liter. So just to sum it up, Merivon is 2 actives: group 7, which is Xemium or Circatus, and group 11, Paraclostrobin. So just gives that continuous protection, and gives you the excellence benefits, which are great disease control and nutrient efficiency and stress tolerance. So the next product I'd like to talk on is, just for a few minutes, is Serifel. And Serifel is a new fungicide from BASF that happens to be a biological. It's a great new fungicide. So with biologicals, they're a new option for consumer expectations, regulatory standards. They allow for flexible working practices for shorter re-entries and pre-harvest intervals. They do support resistance management. We can put Serifel in with the single site products that we use. We can tank mix them, and it also gives enhanced performance. So Serifel, we've marketed Serifel now for 2 years on grapes only. So registered in 2019, so the 2019 and 2020 crop. And this year we've expanded it to 8 or 10 other crops here, 10, 11 crops. Carrots, potatoes, sugar beets, lettuce, high bush and low bush blueberries, peppers, tomatoes, cucurbits, caneberry, and strawberry. So we really opened it up to a lot of other crops. And we've also changed the label in that the storage duration now of Serifel has gone from 16 months to 36 months. So, as a dealer, dealers didn't want to bring in a lot, and growers didn't want to bring in or buy any more than they were going to use in 1 year. So now, if you don't use it all in one season, it's good 36 months from the package date. So the modes of action with Serifel, it works. It's a physical barrier, and that the spores reproduce and occupy the space on the plant, so that the disease-causing pathogens have no room to grow. These Serifel spores get their elbows out and take all the room. They also compete for the nutrients. As those spores, those Serifel spores are growing, they're using up the nutrients. So there's nothing there to support the pathogens. And then the metabolites, the Serifel spores germinate and produce metabolites that have fungicidal and bactericidal activity. So Serifel can be tank mixed and rotated with conventional chemistries. And Serifel can be used. It does have an EcoCert designation, so it can be used as an organic product on organic farms. It can be used in reduced input operations as well, and biodynamic, and can also be used on conventional acres as well with regular crop protection products that you would be using. So it also prolongs on the longevity of the conventional chemistries by helping delay the development of resistance. And that's, like I said earlier, with the single site products, you can put Serifel in, and that'll give us those tools for a longer time period to work with. And it does have, it's proven to manage diseases that are resistant to other fungicides like botrytis and alternaria. So Serifel, there's a list here of products, of actives that it does combine well with, and there's a long list here. And the reps at the Agromart would have this if you are looking at this down the road or for this season. So more importantly, what Serifel is not compatible with. So don't mix it with chlorothalonil, mancozeb, metalaxyl, or metaram. And allow 7 to 10 days between Serifel and these four partners, these four actives. So with Serifel, it's a great product to work with. It's less clumping, less foaming, twice the bulk density of other products, other competitive products, so lower use rates and less product to handle. So the rate is 0.25 to 0.5 kgs per hectare. I bolded the 0.5. That's what we're recommending to go with for a rate, just that one rate. Case size is 4 by 2 kg. And with this product, ensure thorough coverage. Water should be between 4 and 9 pH. And the use of a surfactant can improve performance. It's not required, but recommended. And if you have a a surfactant that you like to use on your crops or on your farm, then you can use that with Serifel. It's rain fast in 3 hours, re-entry intervals 4 hours, and pre-harvest is 0 days, and it's exempt from MRL status. So I just wanted to touch on Ignite, another one of our products. And it's registered in a wide range of crops. Lowbush blueberries, the fifth one down there on the left is what we're keying in on. So there's various rates, and use the higher rates, 4 to 5 liters per hectare, especially if the weed growth is dense, or if the weeds are large, and if the weather is cool and dry. And Ignite is rain fast in 4 hours. In the case is 2 by 10 liter, 2 applications per year. And the re-entry interval is 12 hours, and pre-harvest intervals on various crops. Done there for Lowbush blueberries, going on later in the season after harvest. So just the best management practices here. Performs best when it's warm and sunny, greater than 10 degrees. I know later in the fall, some of those days. So if you can catch a day with better than 10 degrees, and that's ideal. And then during the warmest period of the day, like from 9 to 3, 9 to 4, when it's sunny, that's the ideal timing. Breaks down as the uptake is through foliage, and breaks down too quickly in the soil to allow for root uptake. And there's no residual with this product. And ensure good coverage, and 15 to 20 gallons per acre is best. I just wanted to touch on Circatus, and I mentioned Circatus earlier in the presentation about it being one of the actives in Merivon. And I mentioned consistent continuous protection. And I just wanted to show this slide. And once applied Circatus adheres to the leaf surface, and it is absorbed by the waxy cuticle, and it translocates into the tissue and travels in the xylem. So when you apply this to the crop, 20% goes directly into that leaf tissue. So it goes to work right away. And then roughly 65% is absorbed by the waxy cuticle. So the product in the waxy cuticle keeps delivering into the tissue. So that's what's given us the consistent continuous protection, that we don't see it peak and then drop off. And then roughly 15%, 15% is on the surface, outside surface. So that's your initial barrier to disease. And I just thought I'd put this in. This is the Grower Rewards Program for this year. And if you purchase a minimum of $7,500 in products from us, then just goes across here. If you buy from 4 segments, there's 8%. And then there's an Ignite bonus as well. Purchase 2 cases of Ignite, you're 7% back on your Ignite. And then there's a fungicide bonus as well in segment 4, segment 5, which is 2%. So if you're interested in looking at that, the folks at Agro-Mart would have that to discuss with you as well. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions for Blair? You can write them in the chat box or press raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen. I don't see any questions coming through there, Blair.
Okay. Well, if you do get questions.
I got one. Is this the first year for Merivon in Canada?
Yes, it is. Yeah, 2021 will be the launch year for Merivon.
What do we have an approximate cost per acre?
Merivon would be 73, $74 an acre, in that range.
All right. I don't see any more oh, there's another one, sorry. Are we expecting good things since this is so successful in the States, it says?
What's that again, Megan?
The question, it's more of a comment. I guess it's kind of a question. Are we expecting good things? Maybe from Merivon, she didn't specify, since this is so successful in the States.
Yeah, this product has been well received in the U.S. and it's been used on other crops. I guess the one that I've heard most about would be apples, and that's in Michigan or New York State. And I've had research, I've been at talks with researchers here in Nova Scotia talking about apples, and they've mentioned Merivon, and they've this was back 3 or 4 years ago, and very, very positive, and thought Merivon was doing a great job. So that certainly got the apple growers excited about it. So yeah, it has worked well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, Blair.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Okay, so up next we have Rick deJong. We're a little ahead of schedule. So Rick is the Business Development Manager for Agro-K, and he's going to be presenting on tips for effective and safe spraying. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you for the introduction. I'll just let Blair stop sharing his screen, and then I'll share mine.
Yes.
Get going. There we go. So I will head over here, bring that over there, and let's see how well this works. Share screen. How'd that work? Can everybody see?
This is what happened the other, oh, there, that's perfect. It's on the presentation.
Is that good?
Yep, it's good now.
Yay, wonderful. Well, good afternoon. I should say good evening, everybody. My name's Rick, and I send greetings tonight from the other side of the country. I live in West Kelowna, British Columbia. I periodically have the opportunity to make it out to your fine part of the country. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we're stuck doing meetings like this for the next little while. Although let's all hope there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'll be back out to your neck of the woods in hopefully later this year. I was asked today to give a little bit of talk about the tips and tricks, effective sprayer techniques. And really what I'd like to present today, and there are going to be some tips and tricks in here and some comments about sprayer. I think probably a more apt title for this presentation is Spraying 101. A lot of what I'm going to cover today is common sense stuff that you're probably already aware of, but it's a good reminder. We're getting set up for the beginning of the season here, so certainly I hope you take this as maybe a bit of a reminder. I'm approaching today's talk a little bit lighthearted, and I have buried a few nuggets in here that little tips and techniques that you might find useful out there in the field. But again, a lot of this is spraying 101, stuff that you probably already know or are already doing, but maybe a good reminder. So without further ado, we'll see if this presentation will move forward. So let's talk about things that need to be in our mind and things we should be thinking about before we actually go out there onto that spray rig. First and foremost, read the label. And I know this sounds so simple, and a lot of you are familiar with the same products you're using from one year to the next. But I would encourage you, even if you're already quite familiar with the product from one year to the next, take a look through the label. Labels do change over time. Registrations change. The amount of product to apply, the crops where it's allowed, all those things can change. Your chemical representatives do a pretty doggone good job getting out there and getting the word out to any changes that are coming or that have happened to various labels. But realize the label is the final authority, and you have the responsibility to read that label. Look at the label as the contract between the manufacturer who made the product and you, the farmer, who are applying the product on an edible crop. So you really need to read that label. Make sure it hasn't changed from what you were familiar with in the past. Don't make assumptions because it's a product you've used before. I've done a lot of spraying over the years myself, and I do know you get quite comfortable with these products over time, but make sure that nothing's changed. So always read the label. Some of the things you want to be on top of when you are reading that label. So 3 really key things to keep in mind. Re-entry intervals. This is something that can and does change, unfortunately, somewhat regularly. So when can I go back into those fields? When can I let my employees back into those fields? Know the days to harvest. This can be a critical one. And I've seen farmers that applied a product thinking that they were fine, not realizing that the days to harvest have changed. And lo and behold, they now have a little bit of a conundrum on how to figure things out because they want to pick and they can't pick because the days to harvest have changed for that specific product. So know the days to harvest to the pesticides that you're applying before you apply them, not after. And you also want to be cognizant to what the maximum residue limits are, commonly referred to as MRLs. This is really important, particularly if you're looking at shipping outside the domestic market. The United States market is fairly similar to ours. In fact, they have a lot of products we don't have available to spray. But if you're looking at overseas markets, such as the EU, China, or Japan, if you start talking those more international markets, MRLs really matter. Things that are allowed here because they're registered, if you have an MRL, if you got a residue on your crop, that may exclude you from selling your crop, your berries, to that specific market. So you really want to be aware of what your maximum residue limits are for any potential markets you may want to end up shipping your fruit to. And if you're shipping your fruit to a packing house for them to resell later, you do want to be working with them and coordinating with them to what's being applied so that they know what the residues are on those crops and they can give you guidance to what they want to see and what they don't want to see. You do not want to get into a pickle later where you've applied stuff and now I can't ship here and I can't ship there. So certainly be aware of what you're allowed for the markets where the packers want to see the produce go. Keep that in mind. So re-entry intervals, keep that in your mind, days to harvest, and maximum residue limits based on where this produce may be marketed. Those are some pretty key things you want to be aware of before you spray. Now, this is a big one. And I know it's common sense, but it really is one. And when you're in the heat of the battle, things are happening, I gotta get her done. If you've got products in the shed that aren't labeled properly, maybe the labels come off over time, and you're not really 100% certain what's in that jug, I would really encourage you, don't guess. When in doubt about a product's contents, set it aside. Don't apply it. I use the example of Roundup. I had a customer that gave me a call. He had what he thought was a jug of fertilizer, but the label had come off. But hey, it was over on that side of the pesticide shed that had all the fertilizer jugs. Pretty sure it was fertilizer. It even looked right. It was a white opaque jug. So he sprayed it as a fertilizer on his 7-year-old trees that were just coming into full production after investing in those apple trees for 7 years. Lo and behold, he did a really good job spraying glyphosate over the entire crop, killing pretty much every single tree. All because he made a guess and he thought, well, just because of where it was, for sure. So if you've got some jugs sitting in the shed that for whatever reason the labels come off and you're not 100% certain, it's way cheaper to take that jug and not use it versus applying it and being wrong. So please, if the labels come off, if a jug is not properly labeled, don't use it. What do you do with it though if you're not going to use it? Well, the good news is there is an unused pesticide collection every 3 years. It's organized through Clean Farms. All the manufacturers of the different chemistries are providing money to support Clean Farms. So there's no additional charge to you as the farmer now if you've got a product that you're not using to take it in. So when is the next collection? I would encourage you, if you do have some products that you don't know, they're really old, they're not labeled, any one of the above, and you want to get rid of them, you can certainly reach out to your Turo Agrimark crop advisor or just give the office a shout and say, when's the next pesticide collection? Like I said, they run them every 3 years. So, and I know they've done one relatively recently in the last year or so. So you might have a little bit of a wait. If you do, just kind of put them in a side that you don't touch, and then they're ready for 3 years from now or 2 years from now, whenever the next collection is. So there is an opportunity. Don't hang on to them for 20 or 30 years. We don't want to see pesticides in the shed that are 20 or 30 years old. The containers start to break down, and these are poisons. And some of the older ones are not what we would call user-friendly or user-safe. So if you've got some old stuff, don't be afraid to take advantage of these pesticide collection events. The Turo Agrimark will do their best to get the word out there when the next collection is. So another thing that should be in your mind when you're getting ready to go spray is, what is the quality of your water? How hard is the water that I'm going to spray with? How much calcium's in there? That's what makes it hard. How much organic matter content is in the water? Some of the products that we're spraying react with that organic matter. Glyphosate is another perfect example of this. If someone was spraying glyphosate around the perimeter of their field to get things cleaned up from all of those weeds, that organic matter, if there was a little bit of sediment floating in that tank, that organic matter would react with the glyphosate and actually neutralize it before you even got out of the spray yard, because that neutralizing impact for glyphosate is pretty doggone instantaneous. So having clean, good quality water. What's the pH of that water? That can have an impact. All these things matter. These pesticide products cost a lot of money, and we want them to work the best of their ability. We want to maximize that efficacy, because if they don't work to their optimum, if they're not working at their best, you may not see the money coming out of your pocket, but you're still losing the money because you've purchased that product for a certain reason to get a certain impact. And if that impact isn't maximized, it is indeed dollars lost. I said it's hard to measure those dollars lost sometimes because you're not seeing the dollars come out of your wallet. But if a product isn't working at its peak, it's not what we want to see happen. So we want to keep an eye on things. Now, I am going to spend a bit of time here talking about water pH and why the heck is water pH kind of important. So we want to know the pH of the water going into the spray tank, and we want to know the pH of the spray tank when it's full with all the stuff that your tank mixing into it, because these different products that we're putting in the tank, pesticides and fertilizers and spreader stickers and everything else that might go into the tank, can have an impact on the pH in that tank. And it's good to know what that pH is, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But before I go there, testing the pH of the spray water going into the tank and the spray water when everything's in the tank doesn't need to be a complicated or expensive thing to do. You can buy those pH test strips from Walmart, $9, $10. That does the trick quite nicely. You don't need to go out and spend $150 or $200 on a fancy pH meter. These really cheap pool or hot tub test strips do a wonderful job and will give you enough of a sense to where that pH is and whether or not you need to be doing something about that pH. And here's why. It's something called chemical hydrolysis. Now, it reduces the impact and the effect of the pesticide. It's a reaction in the water in the spray tank caused by the pH. Essentially, it's the pH in that spray tank breaking down that chemical over a period of time. So that chemical is being broken down because the pH in the tank isn't right for those chemicals. So chemical hydrolysis, it's a decreased performance in the pesticide. And remember, this is something we're buying, and this is something we want to maximize the impact of so that it's doing a good job, while some pesticides are very stable in a range of pHs, from high pHs to low pHs, neutral. Some products are very stable on the market, and a lot of the newer ones actually are. But some pesticides begin to break down when the tank pH is too acidic. Other pesticides start to break down when the pH is too alkaline in the tank. So we want to be aware of what the pH we should be looking for in the tank for the products that we put in the tank, and then adjust accordingly to what's needed to adjust that pH. We could be using a potassium bicarbonate if we want to bring the pH up because we're too acidic. We could be using anything from Li 700 to sulfuric acid to bring the pH down if we need to. But we want to be adjusting that pH into the range where we want it to optimize the impact of the products that we're going out there to spray. So, chemical hydrolysis. Know the pH of your water. Know the pH that's in the tank mix after everything is in and has been agitating for a little bit. And we want to remember the quality of the water can change as we go through the grow season. The water you start with in the springtime can have different qualities to it compared to the water towards midsummer. We want to know the stability of the products we're putting into the tank. So what's the ideal optimum pH for the different products that I'm utilizing? And this is information you need to go to your crop advisor for. So don't be afraid to ask for this information. It is information that the manufacturer reps do have, or at least have the ability to get for you. And it's available to you. All you have to do is reach out to your crop advisor and say, hey, I'm using these products. What is the ideal pH? What do I need to be aware of from a pH perspective in the spray tank with these products? So the answer to that question is really only a second question away. And then we want to buffer the pH solution accordingly to what we need. And again, we've got things like potassium bicarbonate that we can use to raise up pH if we need to. And we have acid products that we can utilize to bring the pH down if we need to get it into that sweet spot, so that we're optimizing how well that product is going to work, or those products if there's multiples in the tank. So from a general perspective, so as a general rule of thumb, insecticides are some of the most sensitive products on the marketplace for chemical breakdown due to the pH. So that chemical hydrolysis in the pH. So insecticides are more sensitive to this. Fungicides and growth regulators, as a general rule of thumb, tend to be less susceptible. And those organophosphates and carbamates, they're some of the really susceptible ones to keep in mind. So as a general rule of thumb, insecticides, this really matters. I had a farmer that was utilizing malathion. He did a tank mix of malathion, wasn't checking the pH. It was right around lunchtime, and the tank was agitating. The only product in the tank was malathion. He went in for lunch, and like any true farmer, there's a lot of business that needs to be done. So he had some phone calls to return after lunch before he came back out. It was a number of hours from the time he left to the tank to the time he got back to the spray tank. Then he had to travel out to the field, which was another half hour, 45-minute jaunt. By the time he was actually applying that malathion in the field, thanks to chemical hydrolysis, he was pretty much applying water. The impact from the pesticide was very negligible at best. He didn't see any impact on the insects he was trying to take care of. So it does matter, and it may not always be that prevalent as it worked or it didn't work, but did it work to its maximum effectiveness? And that's really what we want to see, right? To give you a little bit of an idea as to what some optimum pH ranges are, I thought I'd show you a few. Malathion, pH 5 to pH 6 is the range there. Roundup, 4 to 5. Imidan and Ignite, around 5 to 5.5. So you can see there's a bit of variability in what the pHs are. And you can't just say, I'm just going to go neutral. I'll make sure the pH is neutral and I'm good. It really does depend on the products that are ending up in that spray tank and where the pH is once all the products that you're putting in there have put it at. So you really need to check this if you can and be aware of it, because again, we want these products to work. So key statement here for everybody tonight: these products we are spraying have costs associated with them. We're applying them for a reason. We're applying them because we're looking for a desired impact, a desired effect in the crop. So let's take the time and get it right. Test the pH and modify that pH as you need to maximize the efficacy of the products being applied. Don't waste the dollars. Take the time. So let's move on from chemical hydrolysis. Here's an interesting question, and one that I'd be guilty of answering with the wrong answer myself from time to time. When was the last time the sprayer was calibrated? One would hope at least once a year, if not maybe a few times through the course of the season. But I can understand, we get busy, right? And if you're like me, I can be a bit of a procrastinator when things get busy. I do the things that are the priority, and sometimes some of those other due diligence things get missed. This is one of those things that you really don't want to miss doing periodically, because a calibrated sprayer ensures that the right volumes are getting out at the right rates to do the job that we're looking for it to do. So with a clean sprayer, put some water into the tank and go out there and do some spraying and seeing what's being covered. Typically, you want to take the width of your boom, so the ground you're covering, over a certain length of open ground, measure the amount of nutrient or the volume of water coming out of the nozzle. You know your flow rate, you know how many nozzles you've got. You can calculate the math to how much I'm spraying. So it's not that hard. It is handy to have someone there to help you, because you do need to collect the volume coming out of one nozzle. And if you have questions on how to properly calibrate your sprayer, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Again, that's what your Turo crop advisors at the Turo Agrimart are there to do. They're there to help you make sure to get it right. So don't be afraid to reach out to Terry or to Megan and say, hey, I need to get my sprayer calibrated. I haven't done it in a while. I really don't remember exactly. Can you give me some guidance? Can you come out and help me on this front? I'm sure they'd be happy to make sure you're doing it right. And really the trick is periodically put some water in that clean spray tank and go turn on the tank and see what happens. We'll make sure we're getting even flow coming out of every nozzle, and get an understanding to what those flow rates are for every nozzle, so you can work out how much product you're putting out over an acre. So do calibrate the sprayer at least once a year, preferably a couple times through the course of the season. But certainly if you haven't calibrated it in the last year, please consider it. As you're calibrating your sprayer, speed is part of that, right? How much product am I putting out over so much ground? And speed is part of that. Pressure comes into play as well, as does nozzle selection and nozzle volumes. But speed is certainly a big part of that. And my message here, and it's one that I need to remind myself of as well, speed matters. Good coverage over that crop is really important. So slow down. It's not a race to get done. I'm a farmer as well at heart, and my dad has always taught me to go out there and get her done. And that's a good message, because things do need to get done, but we need to slow down and make sure that we're covering the ground properly. If you're going over that field at 5 miles per hour, first of all, you're probably holding on to something pretty tight and a pretty tight seat belt over some of the ground you're covering with wild bush blueberries. But you're not getting good coverage of the pesticide either. So slow down, make sure that you're getting good coverage. And one of the ways to do that is to put some water in that spray tank, go out to the field and spray a short little distance, and then get off the sprayer and go take a look. Am I getting under the leaves? Am I getting down that lateral right to the bottom? Am I getting the coverage I need to get? So again, don't be afraid to put some water in a clean tank, spray a section, spray a little bit, and see how you're doing. That's the time to do it. But one of the key messages here is you're not racing down the field. You want to go at a pace that you're getting the job done, but at the same token, you're getting good coverage. Nozzle selection. Boy, where do you begin on this one? You could probably do an entire 1 hour presentation on how to select the right nozzle for the job. There's so much to consider. What is being sprayed? What pressure do you have the sprayer set at usually? What's the nozzle spacing on that sprayer? What's the distance from the boom to the crop? What nozzle material should I select? All these things and more have a role to play on which nozzle I should be using to spray with. It can be somewhat dizzying. It can be quite overwhelming. You start getting into different manufacturers, and do I need a fan spray, a hollow cone, a solid cone? What the hey, what am I going to select? I would really encourage you at this point with doing nozzle selections, don't be shy. Again, ask for help. Make sure you're getting it right. It has a huge role to play. It's amazing. You look at that little teeny weeny little nozzle, and it looks so simple, but that nozzle is a highly engineered little piece of material that is designed for a certain flow rate and for certain types of products. There's a lot of engineering that goes into that. And there's a lot of tech that goes into selecting the right nozzles. And you get into these charts and they can be a little bit daunting. So if you need help, ask. Megan and Terry are happy to help give you the guidance to get the job done by choosing the correct nozzles for what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're finding it a little bit daunting, don't be shy. A lot of people do, including myself. So ask. It's just a question away. Pressure. Here's a little bit of information about pressure to keep in mind, because you're going to be adjusting the pressure to get the right pressure. When we increase the pressure by 4 times, that's essentially doubling the flow rate. So doubling the pressure will not double the flow rate of the end product that we're applying. You got to 4 times the pressure to get double the flow rate. So kind of keep that in your mind as you're calibrating your sprayer. It's not just so simple as, oh, I'm almost there in the flow rate. I just want to get it up by half. By increasing the pressure by half doesn't correlate to increasing the flow rate. 4 times the flow rate, or 4 times the pressure gives you double the flow rate. And remember, the higher the pressure, the smaller the droplet size, and that increases the chance of drift. We want to minimize the drift because we want it on the crop below. And there are situations where there are some fields where drift really matters because of residential development. With Lowbush blueberries, you got some fields that are way out in the back country, so drift isn't so much of an issue, although we still want to minimize drift. We want to keep it on the crop. That's where it needs to go. And higher pressure means we're going to get smaller droplets and potentially more drift if there's a bit more of a breeze out there. Higher pressure also wears out nozzles faster. So what we want to try to do is get the lowest pressure we can for the sprayer while still getting the job done, still getting the under part of all those leaves all the way down that entire lateral. And the best way to double check to make sure you've got the right pressure to get the job done without overkill is to put some water in the tank and go spray and take a look what's going on. Am I getting that entire lateral and all those leaves nice and wet? So the lowest pressure possible to get the good job done is the way to go. And this is why. So here's a bit of unfortunate news, but it's very realistic. Those nozzles, they wear out. Unfortunately, they wear out more frequently than we would probably like. A lot of the products we're putting through these nozzles create a lot of wear, create a lot of friction. and are somewhat corrosive. So they do wear out the nozzles relatively fast. And just to give you an idea, 10% wear on a nozzle can have a huge impact on the quality of that coverage, and how much product is actually going out there. And unfortunately, wear usually means we're putting out more product, not less product. So you get 10% wear in your nozzles, you're putting out 10% more product than you need to be putting out. That can add up real fast when you start talking larger acreages. So wear can really have a huge impact, and these nozzles wear out relatively frequently. So we do need to be keeping an eye on those nozzles, and that's why it's a good idea to calibrate that sprayer a little bit more frequently versus less frequently. So if we do have nozzle wear, we're capturing it and we're dealing with it before it becomes a huge issue and wasted dollars. So let's start talking about tank mixing. So we've put all that thought into getting ready before we roll out the sprayer. Now we're ready to start tank mixing. Well, first and foremost, wear the proper gear. Now this guy's going a little bit overkill. And again, I wanted to be a little bit light on my presentation today. But I do like the way his gloves are tucked into his coveralls. His boots are tucked into his coveralls. That is indeed what we're looking for, because if those gloves were outside the coveralls, he had a spill on the coverall running down the sleeve, it would actually pool in the glove, which is what we want to avoid. You probably don't need such an advanced gas mask, but you do want to be wearing the proper goggles when you're mixing, and just be cognizant of the fact that we are working with pesticides. If you've got your spray suit, it's getting a bit worn. The gloves are getting some cracks in them. I may have a little split. Be diligent. Replace those coveralls periodically. Replace those gloves regularly, as need be. Keep an eye on them. Check their condition. If you're wearing a ventilator, when was the last time you replaced the cartridge? The goggles, are they fitting right? So wear the proper gear and maintain the gear properly. Again, we're working with pesticides. Here's a slide to illustrate what I mean by we're working with pesticides. If you're out there spraying and you have your applicator's license, the term LD50 is going to ring a bell to you. You're going to be aware of what that means. It's the 50% lethal dose. So when they're evaluating different pesticides for their toxicity, whether it's oral toxicity through the mouth, dermal through the skin, and in some cases they even have for breathing. What they're doing here is they've determined, utilizing rodents, how much active ingredient in milligrams to kill, to have a lethal dose to 50% of the rodent population in the trial per kilo of body weight. So that's milligrams per kilo of body weight, milligrams of active ingredient per kilograms of body weight to the test subject. What's going to cause 50% of the test population to pass away? So the lower the number, the higher the danger. The higher the number, the lower the danger. Now you can look at some of these products, and I know you're not probably going to eat these products, but contamination can happen. Imidan, oral, 113 milligrams per kilo of body weight is all it would take to kill 50% of those exposed. Dermal's 1550. Assail, oral, 1064, dermal greater than 2000. Glyphosate, I like to pick on glyphosate a little bit. Oral, 4300, dermal, well over 7900. In relative perspective, I put at the bottom there DEET, which is off, right? DEET for insects. The oral on DEET is 1950 milligrams per kilo. So you don't want, when you're supplying DEET on the face, don't get it on the lips, because that's going to get oral and that could cause some problems. There's why, 1950. But one of the take homes to remember here is it's not just the one-off. This is all one-off type stuff. But if you're spraying a number of times through the course of the season. So it's not just my exposure today, it's my ongoing exposure over the course of the season, as I'm spraying today, tomorrow, the next day, and then I'm back on the tractor spraying again and mixing a week or 2 or 3 weeks later and doing the same thing again. It's that ongoing exposure over the course of the season that can really be a problem. So yeah, there are some pesticides out there that are relatively toxic. Most of us are aware of what those ones are and handle them with a lot of respect, which is a good thing. But even those that are less toxic, even those that newer ones that are more sensitive to the environment and more sensitive for us as the applicators, you got to think about the ongoing exposure over time. I had a friend of mine who had exposure over the course of his season, and at the end of the year in October, November, he wasn't feeling well. And when he went to his doctor to find out, sure enough, it was pesticide exposure that, made his health go downhill. And it took him a while to recover. So remember, folks, it's not just the one-off, it's the ongoing exposure to these pesticides over time. And if we respect them and use them correctly, we'll be fine. But we do need to keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind when we're starting tank mix is we really want to avoid cross-contamination with the water source.
Hey, Rick,
Yes?
are you still on the wear the proper gear slide?
No?
Okay, that's what we're seeing.
Is that what everybody's seeing?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop and reshare then. So is it stop sharing?
Yep. I don't know how far past that you were.
Well, we're going to keep going once we get reshare
Okay.
screen. We're going to share PowerPoint, share. So what are you seeing now, Megan?
It says started screen sharing.
Okay.
Now I'm seeing the water source slide.
Bingo. My apologies. You've missed a few good slides, but we're going to carry on.
No worries, thanks.
And if it happens again, please let me know, Megan. I'm on a wired high speed optic fiber connection, so hopefully it doesn't.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Okay. So we want to protect our water source. And if you're running a nurse tank because you're running out to the backcountry with water, realize that once that if you're pre-mixing stuff in that nurse tank, that once that nurse tank is contaminated, it's not a whole lot different than spray tank going down the field. So we want to keep that in mind, because I know a lot of you will have fields that aren't exactly right beside the house. They're out in the backcountry, and you'll be hauling tanks on the back of flat decks and such, tanks of water. And sometimes I know it's quite common when the sprayer's out there spraying, somebody's back at the tank filling the tank up with pesticide so that when the sprayer comes in, it's a quick reload and out you go again. But remember, as soon as you start putting pesticides into that nurse tank, you now have to treat the nurse tank just like a pesticide spray tank, because that's what it is essentially. So when you go back to fill up that nurse tank, when the sprayer's out and about, those sidewalls are now contaminated. So you want to be careful when you're filling it up. I was as recently as last week hearing a story of a farmer that was pulling water out of the tank or out of the river to pour it into the tank, and he had the pump running. He was loading the sprayer with water. There were some pesticides in the tank, but the tank was well away from being full, so he thought he had time to run up to the barn to do a few things. Well, while he was up at the barn doing a few things, his wife came along, noticed the tank was already full. Matter of fact, the tank was overflowing and the water was coming out of the tank, which concerned her. So she turned off the tractor so that the pump was no longer drawing water out of the tank. But the water hose was actually in the tank versus suspended over the tank. That's the air gap I'm referring to. But in this case, the hose was in the tank. So when the pump was turned off and she went away, by the time the gentleman who was doing the spraying came back to the tank, that hose had siphoned most of the product out of the tank and back into the river, unfortunately carrying a bunch of pesticide with it. So the best way to ensure that is when you're filling your tank, whether it's a contaminated nurse tank that's supplying the sprayer or the sprayer itself directly, is to have the hose, have an air gap, have the hose suspended over the tank so the water is coming down through the air and into the tank versus having the hose just slung into the tank. And if for whatever reason you can't create an air gap because of the way you're pulling water, at the very least, backflow preventer. You can get portable backflow preventers in line. So if you're pumping water out of a river, you can have a backflow preventer on the side of the pump so that it doesn't allow that water to get siphoned the other way. Protect the water source. Let's see if it progresses. Did that move forward, Megan?
Sure did.
Wonderful. We're back on track. So here's something that I'm going to mention. And if you've got your spray mixing area close to the home farm, this is pretty easy. Have some emergency wash facilities set up. Have an eye wash station. So if you get splashed up on the face and it got under your mask, that you can take the mask off, rinse out your face, maybe some soap in there so the fresh water, and make sure you're mixing under ventilation. Most are, you're outside. But if you're doing your mixing out in the backcountry because you've hauled all your stuff up there because those are where the fields are, make sure that that flat deck or that rig that you're pulling from the nurse tank off of has a little bit of emergency wash facilities on it. Again, it just takes some fresh water, a little bit of soap, and maybe an eye flush so that if you get in your face, you can at least flush out your eyes. If there's an emergency, you want to have that facility set up before the emergency, not trying to deal with things after. So ask yourself, what do I need to have with me when I'm in that backcountry filling up the sprayer in case something goes wrong and I get pesticide onto myself or one of my employees? What could we do about it? Make sure you've planned for it and you have some of those things with you out in the backcountry. And if you're close to the farm still at that spray station, make sure you're set up with some emergency stuff. Ask that what if question and make sure you have the right answers. Okay, hopefully my slides progressed again. We want to avoid spraying under windy conditions, of course. We all are aware of that. Sometimes, though, it's not realistic to say there's absolutely no breeze. So if there is a light breeze, emphasize light to keep the government happy, light breeze, we want to make sure that we're loading products and we're upwind. So if there is a little bit of breeze and if there is a little bit of mist or a little bit of dust coming off of the water, that powdered product, that it's not coming at us. We want it to be going away from us. So if there's a little bit of a breeze, you always want to be upwind of the breeze, and you never want to be pouring products at eye level. You always want to be lower. You can see this gentleman here, the top of the tank that he's pouring into is chest height, not at the head height. And sometimes that might mean you have to have a little bit of a platform built so that you can stand on a slightly elevated platform to pour into the tank. But you do not want to, it's very risky having stuff at eye level, at head level. You want to be working around that mid-chest area, which is what this gentleman's doing here. So don't pour products at eye level. Really be attention to if there's a breeze, which direction it is compared to where you're standing. And of course, if it's too windy, don't spray. Now, there are products, water dispersible granules and wettable powders that come in bags. Manufacturers are getting better today with perforated seals, so you can just rip along the perforation and you got to reseal like a Ziploc bag. But not every bag has that. And if they don't just tear the bag open. Go get a sharp knife, a pair of scissors, cut the bag open properly. We, again, want to avoid spills. And if you're tearing a bag open with a wettable powder in it and it doesn't have a perforation for an easy tear, there's a big chance that you're going to get a spill happening, and this is what we want to avoid. Now, with those pre-mixed water solubles, or pre-mixed powders, I know this isn't going to be overly popular, but I'm still going to say you need to be, if you can think about adding some water to them before you add them to the tank. And that simply just cuts down on the dust. Anything we can do to cut down on contamination of ourselves and contamination of the environment around us. Now, here's probably what I suspect is one of my more contentious slides of the entire presentation. And I get it as a farmer myself. Water volumes. Remember, dilution is our friend. And I realize this is a tough one because it means more trips, it means more loads, and particularly if you're not close to the water source and you're hauling water in to do your spraying, more trips back and forth from the water source to the field. It's not easy, I get that. But dilution really is our friend. It helps when we're doing a lot of tank mixing. So if we've got more than one or two different products in the tank, the more water we have in the tank, the less likely there's going to be a reaction and clogged nozzles and messy sprayer problems that we want to avoid. Also, we need that volume to cover the acreages. Now, I've got some apple suggestions here and high bush blueberries. Low bush, if you can at least get upwards of around 150 liters per acre, and I know that's a lot of water, and some of you are going to struggle to get there because of what you're doing, but I guess it's one of those cases, please don't shoot the messenger. More water is better from a pesticide performance perspective, from a crop coverage perspective. More water is better from a tank mix compatibility perspective. So whatever volume you can do, the more you're able and willing to do, the better the performance is going to be and the less problems you're going to have with your tank mixes. So if you can't get to 150, at least know that the more water you're putting out there with the product, the less problems you're going to have and the more efficacy you're going to have, the better the product's going to work. So water volumes are not an area to cut back on. Really try to push yourself to how much water you're prepared to apply and try to go there. Try to meet those water volumes as much as possible. And again, I know this is a tough one because my dad always taught me, go out there and get her done. And this could have a huge impact on the number of trips and the amount of hauling you're doing. But it is something worth really evaluating what you're able to do and maximize it. This is a good way, once you spent those pesticide dollars, to maximize the impact of that product going out to the field. Don't cut back on water. Now, when you're mixing, pretty obvious, always start with a clean tank. But I know things get busy and things happen. Still, you do need to start with a clean tank. I'm a procrastinator, and I've had it where I've gone out and opened to start mixing, and I look at the tank and I go, ooh, I guess I shouldn't start with that. It's a bit too messy. It happens. Tank cleaners are inexpensive, and I would really encourage you to use them. A lot of the pesticides on the market today can leave residues on the inside of the spray tank and the inside of that nurse tank, by the way, as well, that will cake into that material a little bit. And it may not be overly visual at the eye, but it's there. And then there's other pesticide products we use that are like paint strippers. They're amazing products for stripping other products that are on that plastic, off the plastic, and back into solution in the spray tank. Might not be desirable, might not be at the right time. So there are many tank cleaners on the market today. There's a few that the Turo Agrimark carry. I think Demolish is one of them, and there's a few others on the market. They're not expensive, and they really are worth their weight in gold. Don't just rinse the tank out with clean water and think you're done. You're not. There's a lot of residues that build up on these tanks. And again, some pesticide products soak into the tank, and other ones are good paint strippers that pull these products back out and into solution again. The only way to deal with them are utilizing tank cleaners in between sprays. So don't be afraid to use those tank cleaners. Now, I'm mixing. What the hay should the order be? Now, yes, I've had farmers with great success doing different orders than what I'm going to go through today. But what we have found at Agro-K, working with the different farmers we work with, this is an order that seems to work quite well. First rule of thumb, make sure you've got lots of water in the spray tank before you start putting a lot of stuff in there. Typically, the rule of thumb is I want 2/3 full of water in that spray tank before I start throwing stuff in there. So now I got 2/3 full of water, get the agitation going. Once the agitation is going, we can now start adding our acid-based products. Typically, these are fertilizer products. Typically, these are micronutrient-based products. This is when they would go in. Acid-based products go in early. And the reason we want to add these acid-based products early in the mixing is because they're going to impact that pH of the tank. Remember chemical hydrolysis. We want them in, we want them to buffer that pH in the water, and we want that water pH to stabilize a little bit before we start adding a whole bunch of other stuff. So we want to add those acid-based products first. Then if you're putting on any organic materials, maybe you're putting on a foliar humic acid or a foliar seaweed product, they would go in next. And keep in mind, you're adding water as you go here because dilution is our friend. We don't want to make tank mix reactions take place. So after those organics go in, now it's time, if you're putting on any foliar NPK type fertilizers, whether it's a 105210 or a 924-3, this is when those products would go in. And then you'd like to have the tank almost full before the pesticides go in. So if you note here, the pesticides are going in last. And it's because all these other things you're putting in are impacting the pH. And that could impact the pesticide and start the pesticide to break down. Pesticides don't like sudden changes back and forth in pH in the mix tank as you're mixing along. So the pesticides go in right at the end when you have almost completely full tanks. So you're maximizing your dilution. Everything's been agitating for a little bit, for a few minutes, so that this pH has stabilized, everything's kind of dissolved, worked in. Now the pesticides can go in and you top up the tank and you're ready to go. So again, I know there's different approaches to this. This is an approach to tank mixing that has worked well for the farmers I've worked with across North America. And so this is what I offer tonight. A few things to keep in mind as you're doing that tank mixing and filling the sprayer. Pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it anyways. You want to avoid mixing concentrates together in a bucket before putting them in the tank. When you're mixing concentrates together, that's when you get into problems. That's when you get reactions that form what we call precipitates, which are really fine solids that can start clogging up nozzles and stuff. And some of those reactions can be what we call exothermic. They put out a lot of heat. Some of them can be quite cold, and some of them with exothermic can be quite something. Pre-dissolved water-soluble products prior to placing them in the spray tank. It's really easy to just let the spray tank do the dissolving for you, but it can be quite a potential reaction if there's already other products in the spray tank. So if the water-soluble isn't the first thing in the spray tank, you need to get a bucket and try to do some dissolving, try to put some water with it before it goes into the spray tank. Now, Solupaks, there's always an exception to the rule, and unfortunately, Solupaks would be one of those key exceptions to the rule. With Solupaks, they need to go in the tank first and foremost. Those Solupaks don't agree with a lot of acid-based materials and a lot of other products. So if you're putting in a Solupak, the Solupak goes in first, and we want to make sure that that Solupak is completely dissolved before you start putting other stuff into the tank. So there's a key one to keep in mind. Solupaks always go in first. Now, if there's any other questions or concerns about compatibility, the industry comment is consider doing a jar test. There's a lot of work with jar tests. They can be a bit messy, and I'm certainly going to invite you to reach out to your local Turo Agromark crop advisor to come out and help you do any jar testing. I'm sure they'll mention that to me later, that I threw them under the bus on that one. But certainly, if there are any questions, don't be afraid to do a jar test to confirm compatibility. Take a little bit of every product, put it in a jar with the water you're going to be doing the spraying with, give it a good shake. What happens? If you start seeing a lot of milky material floating in the jar, you've got problems. Don't proceed with the mix. So now we're at the time where we're ready to go doing some spraying. What should we do and what should we not do? Well, first thing, in the heat of the day, you better not be spraying. Do not spray in the heat of the day. And I understand this past year, I live in the Okanagan Valley, which in BC, which is quite a semi-arid area. We get California summers over here. And I understand in 2020, you stole our summer and you had a nice summer, and we actually had a cold, wet spring and a fairly damp summer as well, because you took our summer. So good on you. In the heat of the day, 25, 26 Celsius is about the max. You do not want to be spraying any warmer. At 27 to 28, I've seen straight water burn leaves. So we want to avoid the heat of the day. Do not spray once you start pushing 25, 26 degrees. It's time to turn the sprayer off. We also want to try to avoid spraying on wet leaves. Now, I know that's not always easy, particularly later in the season or early in the season when we get a lot of dew at certain times of the day. But those wet leaves are throwing a variable into the spray equation that can be kind of challenging. First of all, it's further diluting the product. And because the leaves are wet, it can impact how that spray is covering the leaf, causing product to pull together into more concentrated droplets that can lead to leaf burn. So wet leaves can lead to burning leaves, and that's what we want to try to avoid. So as much as physically feasible, we want to be spraying our product when the leaves are as dry as possible. And do not, of course, over apply. You're trying to get the crop wet, but not so much that it's dripping. And this is why it's kind of neat to put some water in the sprayer at the early time of the year when you actually have leaves, and just straight water in a clean sprayer and go spray. How am I doing? Is the crop to the point of dripping, or is it nicely moist? Because if it's to the point of dripping, you're putting out too much product. You need to slow down a little bit. Here's a rule. I'm calling it the Dell's 150 rule in honor of a colleague and friend of mine. And what the 150 rule is, it gives us an idea of when to not spray anymore and what we need to select for sprays if we do need to spray a pesticide at this point. And what Dell's 150 rule is it addresses leaf function. So what we do is we add the ambient temperature in Fahrenheit to the percent humidity, and when that number starts getting close to 150, that leaf is no longer functioning well and will not take in product. So if I'm 145, 150, 160, when I add the temperature in Fahrenheit to the humidity, don't choose products that you need to penetrate into the leaf. So if you're applying a nutritional product, it's not going to get in because the leaf isn't going to absorb it because it's not functioning at that point very well to do that. Same thing with systemic pesticides. If I'm putting on a systemic fungicide and I'm at 145, 150, 160 in that number, don't apply it. It's not going to get in. If you need to put on a fungicide, you need to look at a contact fungicide that's going to contact on the leaf and take care of the disease problem. So you want to avoid systemic products that you're trying to get into the crop as soon as you start approaching or going over that 150 rule. So ambient temperature in Fahrenheit plus humidity, as soon as it gets close to 150, do not use products that need to penetrate into the leaf. They're simply not going to penetrate in. They're not going to work. And we need these things to work. And if you're using an insecticide or a fungicide at this point in time, you want to go to the ones that are contact, not ones that are systemic. So something to keep in mind if you get another one of my Okanagan summers. So do I spray in the morning? Do I spray in the evening? What the heck, when do you spray best? I tend to recommend farmers to spray in the evening after midnight. But lots of farmers do spray in earlier in the evening as well. There are some trade-offs to keep in mind. And it's all about leaf wetness and disease pressure. Something to keep in mind when you're making the decision of spraying is what am I spraying and why am I spraying it and what type of disease pressure do I have out there at this point in time. Because as soon as the leaves are wet for more than 10 to 12 hours, we now have incubated disease. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So if you spray after midnight and the sun comes up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, that 12-hour period isn't until noon, those leaves are pretty much going to be dry by the time 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours rolls around. Where if you're spraying at 6 o'clock, at 7 o'clock at night, well, now we're dealing with leaf wetness well beyond 7 a.m. the next morning. There's your 10 to 12 hours. So you want to be keeping that in mind. There's the trade-off if you're spraying earlier than midnight, because then you've got maximum leaf wetness. So do I have any disease pressure? Am I concerned about disease, or is this more of an insecticide? It's been relatively dry. I don't have a lot of disease pressure out there. Yeah, maybe I can spray in the later part of the evening around 6 or 7 o'clock and go through the night. But do keep in mind, 10 to 12 hours of leaf wetness will incubate a lot of diseases. So we want to be careful about that when we're making that judgment call. So that's why I recommend most people spray in the early hours of the morning after midnight. But again, there may be reasons and rationale, but keep in mind, there's the trade-off. So, obvious one I know, but I'm going to say it because it plays into the LD50 and that oral I was talking about earlier with cross-contamination. Do not eat, drink, or smoke when you're working around the pesticides. If it's time for a coffee break, if it's time for a meal break, then step back, wash up, and have your coffee break or have your meal break. But wash up before you take your break. That's where we get that dermal. Most people don't put pesticides in their mouth. We know better. But if I got pesticides on my hands and now I'm handling that sandwich and drinking that coffee, that's where we're going to get that dermal exposure to the pesticide. So wash up before you take your breaks. Now, spraying is done. After spraying, and this is common sense, but you need to clean up right away. And I'm a procrastinator, so I'm really bad at this. Like I said earlier, I confess to going out to the sprayer for the next spray and not liking what's in there. So I'm a procrastinator and guilty of this myself. But when you're done spraying, that's the time to clean up your equipment, including putting in the tank cleaner, running things through. That's the time to clean your clothes, make sure they get laundered right away. They're not sitting in the clothes hamper for 3 days. Guilty of that myself. No, you want to make sure that they're getting laundered right away because they're contaminated. And you want to make sure that you clean yourself. Go have a shower. You've been around pesticides all day. Get it off of you. Also, if you've got empty pesticide containers, you can recycle them. Bring them back to the Turo Agrimart. They take them back. You need to make sure that the lids are off. They unfortunately can't recycle the lids, believe it or not, and they need the labels off as well. If you can, you need to triple rinse them, and if you can puncture them, that's a bonus as well. Although I don't believe that's an absolutely mandatory thing, but at the very least, triple rinse them. Get rid of the lids. You can't recycle the lids, unfortunately. Get those labels off because they can't deal with them either. Have a nice clean jug, hopefully punctured if possible. And those can go back to the Turo Agrimart at any point in time. You can get them back there and they can deal with them. So you don't need to have all these empty pesticide containers hanging around the farm. Deal with them, get them done. One more thing before I wrap up, I've got one last slide and it's a little bit of a dig. I'm going to be speaking again the evening of March 23rd, 7 p.m. and Lise LeBlanc from LP Consulting is going to be joining me as well. We've got a whole pile of nutritional research we've been working on. This is year 4 of all the research we've been doing specifically for Lowbush blueberries in Nova Scotia. We've got a lot of research to share with you regarding what we've discovered as far as what is needed from a nutritional standpoint for this crop. It is a very unique crop, and we're figuring out a few things in your backyard about nutrition, and very specifically about foliar nutrition, but nutrition in general as well, that we'd really like to share with you, pertinent talking about the sprout year, the fruiting year. So there's going to be an opportunity the evening of March 23rd. Thanks to the Turo Agrimart and Megan and Terry, we're going to have another little session at that point in time. So that's it. I will stop sharing the screen. Thank you for all your time tonight. I hope I didn't go too much further past 8 o'clock, and certainly willing and eager to answer any questions there may be.
All right, perfect, Rick. Yep, so there are a few questions. And just before we get to the questions, the session on March 23rd, we are going to be sending out some more information on that. So that's why you haven't seen that yet. We'll send that along probably next week, so you guys can sign up. All right, so questions. First one, Rick, is when adjusting your pH for your water, can you do it after you mix your tank, or adjust the water first and then tweak it again if needed?
Oh, good question. I tend to recommend that you want everything in the tank first. Unless your water pH is really off from where you want it. So if I'm looking for a pH of around 6.5 or 7 and my water pH is 8.3, you're gonna want to make some adjustment to it before you start putting everything in, and vice versa. If my water is really acidic, I might want to bring it up a little bit. But unless my water is really out to lunch, I really encourage farmers, it's really after you've done your mix that you want to be buffering that pH. Nice to know what you're going into so you can make sure it's not too crazy, and then you fine tune it once all the products are in.
And there was a second part to that question. Is there a particular product that you can buy to adjust the pH? We carry LI 700, so that's a water acidifier.
Yeah. And that one is pretty neat because it's all acting as a bit like a super spreader sticker. It was initially designed specifically for glyphosate tank mixes, but it has a lot of other uses as well. And it's a nice, safe product to handle. You can also use sulfuric acid. There's different grades of sulfuric acid on the market that you can, I'm sure, buy through the Turo Agrimart, which is acid to bring the pH down. And they would also be able to sell you potassium bicarbonate to bring the pH up if you needed to.
Great. And next question. If you have a chemical inductor on your sprayer, should you still pre-mix some chemicals in a bucket before adding to the inductor? If, for example, wettable powders like Velpar.
Yes, you don't need to go quite so much into a slurry, but wetting them down a little bit will help. Yes.
Okay, and the third question I have, on the 23rd, will you be including discussion on boron, sulfur, and copper?
Oh, most definitely. A matter of fact, on those three nutrients, and particularly on the sulfur, we've got some very interesting research to share. So yes, we will definitely be sharing information on those three nutrients and zinc, iron, to give you a little bit of a glimmer. Zinc, iron, and phosphorus are three other ones we're going to be sharing with you. But yeah, we're going to cover the gamut. We're going to cover all the essential nutrients and what we're learning in relation to lowbush, wild blueberries, in your home province, right there in Nova Scotia. Some of you may have even been taking part in the research. We did 3 years worth of research from a nutritional standpoint, simply sat measuring the nutrients within the various crops from a low yielding to an average yielding to high yielding fields, and cross-reference that material to come up with what we felt were optimum ranges to maximize yield potential on your fields. Then we developed more recently some foliar fertilizer programs for the sprout year and the fruiting year, and now we're starting to evaluate them in field research. So we've developed these programs, these nutritional programs, based on 3 years worth of research. Now we're doing more research to evaluate the programs as we talk about them out in the marketplace. So yeah, we're going to do a deep dive into nutrition.
Yep, awesome. And we'll send out more information on that next week.
Yep.
All right, awesome. I don't think I see any more questions, so thank you very much, Rick.
You bet, my
Always
pleasure.
great information.
Unfortunately, I do need to leave at this point. So if there are any further questions, please feel free to convey them to either Megan or Terry, and you can communicate them to me later to make sure that those questions get answered. So
Absolutely.
thank you for the opportunity. Enjoy the next speaker.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, before I introduce the next speaker, just a couple of the attendees. We have a Carol and a Diane's iPad, I think. I'm not sure who those are, so if you could contact either me or Terry if you want pesticide points so that we can record you as attendance. All right, so our next speaker is Graham Kempton. He's the regional manager with Bayer Crop Science, and he has an update on Propulse, Proline, Luna Tranquility, and Option. So welcome, Graham.
Thank you, Megan. Can you hear me okay to start?
Yeah, I can hear you, Graham.
Okay, next we need to get the slides up here, so just bear with me.
Sure thing.
Okay, okay, do you see a slide yet?
Not yet. I think you have to hit share screen.
Yeah, I did that.
You did that? Okay, it's not sharing yet.
How about now?
Oh, progress. Yep, there it is.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to have to look at a side screen because it came up on the wrong monitor, so please bear with me. Anyhow, good evening, everyone. Appreciate the introduction from Megan, and just want to say thank you to the Agri-Mart for inviting me to speak this evening. As Megan said, I'm Graham Kempton, and I'm the Territory Sales Manager in the Atlantic region for Bayer Crop Science. Okay, are the slides changing on your end, Megan?
No, I'm still seeing your title slide.
Yeah,
I
that's
can
what
see
I
your
thought.
mouse. Your cursor.
I'm not sure what's going on, but they won't change on my end either for some reason.
Okay, and you can't get it onto your other main screen?
Okay, did that change?
I'm still seeing you, so not sharing your screen yet. Yep, okay, so I see your Propulse slide. Yep. Great.
Okay, hopefully this will work. So, I'm going to talk on a number of products tonight, but the list looks a little long, but really I'm going to concentrate on the top 3 products and then just probably a minute on each of the last 3. So that won't take much time at the end. So wanted to start off with Propulse. And Propulse is a new fungicide that we actually got registered last year for blueberries and a number of other crops. But as was the case with many things last year, we didn't have supply. So we did one presentation on it, and then we didn't have anything in the market, and we've rectified that for this year. So Propulse is registered and gives superior fruit rot control and monolinear blight. And it's a combination of prothioconazole, which will ring a bell with many of you because that's the active ingredient in Proline. And in Propulse, we've combined it with another active ingredient called fluopyram. So these two together provide immediate and long-lasting disease control. We get both contact and systemic protection. It is registered for use in both the fruit and the sprout year, so that's not a concern. And all of the relevant export MRLs are in place, so that's not a concern either. And it is a very nice formulation. We aren't aware of any mixing or use issues from that standpoint. So as I said, it's got both preventative contact and systemic activity. So we get long-lasting disease control. It is a combination of both a group 3 and a group 7 fungicide. So it's great for resistance management. And with those two products combined, of course, we get a fairly broad spectrum of control, covering fruit rots, monolinia, and then suppression of septoria, leaf rust, and validancinia. So you can have a nice tank mix without actually tank mixing because you've got 2 actives right in one jug. That's a good formulation. Oh. So the fluopyram is the group 7 and prothioconazole is the group 3. It's a 400 SC formulation. And of course, with 2 different modes of action, that means basically the 2 chemicals work on the diseases in different ways. And in this case, the fluopyram helps to inhibit cell respiration, which of course reduces energy production. And the prothioconazole inhibits sterile biosynthesis, and that's essential for membrane structure and function. And this, as I said earlier, it is translaminar and systemic, and it does move through the xylem, so it will move from where it's applied up through the plant, but not down through a plant. So again, we're registered for control of monolinia blight, suppression for septoria, leaf rust, validancinia, and then you can see at the bottom there a long list of fruit rots. And I'm not going to go through into all those Latin names. I'll just mutilate all of them, but it is quite a good list there. So this isn't off the label, but this is kind of through some discussions with some of the other extension people where we think the best fit for Propulse is. And of course, Propulse and Proline are probably going to be the basis for many fungicide programs this year. So go with your strengths. And for Propulse in the fruiting year, targeting it for monolinia blight and fruit rots would be the way to go with it. As with most products, you are going to be limited to how many sprays you can put on. So use them where you're going to get the best bang for your buck. And then in the sprout year, of course, the leaf diseases, it'll fit there fine in rotation with Proline if that's your choice for another product or whatever else it may be. So the rates do range from the 750 mils per hectare up to 1,000 mils. So that depends on the pest you're going after, and I'll get into that a little more in a few minutes. We certainly recommend a minimum of 20 gallons of water per acre. You know, preventative fungicides, you need good coverage, and water is still pretty cheap, so don't skimp on the water. And the rain-fast interval is always, I guess, a particular interest of mine. And for this product, rain-fast is 1 to 2 hours, but when dry. And when dry for pesticide products means it's dried on. It's not, I think it's dry, or it might be dry, or I've got something else to do, so I'm just going to leave it and hope it works. You know, you're spending good money on the products, so you want them to dry on so they'll do a proper job. And we all know that the weather can change in a few minutes here in the Maritimes, but we really do need to try to plan our application so that we do get them on, so they'll do the job. If you get rained out right after a spray, then you know that's just wasted time and investment. And if it gets washed off as soon as you spray it, you know, in a way, it's almost a pollutant because it's not where it's supposed to be. So if you've got a damp, dewy, foggy morning, it's going to take more than an hour or two for any product to dry on the crop. So we need to keep that in mind. Re-entry intervals, of course, are very important. They're there. That's a safety thing. And for this product, it's 24 hours and then 7-day pre-harvest. And as we see with most of the new registrations, we're limited not only by the number of applications, but because there's variable rates, we're normally limited by a total volume of application of product. And in the case of Propulse, that would be 2 liters per hectare per year. So, you know, once you hit that 2 liters, you're at the maximum. Where this is a new product, it's packaged 6.1 liters in a jug, and there's 2 jugs in a case. So looking at the specific rates for Monolinia, it's registered at the low label rate, which is 300 mils per acre. And if you follow the label, it certainly is good to do that. We say that begin applications at 40% of the blossom buds, have the bud scale separated. And then if you need a follow-up application, you can do it 7 to 10 days later. And that follow-up could be Propulse, or it could be something else like Proline, etc. For the Septoria, the leaf rust, and Valdicinia, there's actually 2 different rates there. So the Septoria goes down at the same rate as the Monolinia, the 300 mils per acre. For suppression of leaf rust and Valdicinia, that's the high label rate at 400 mils per acre. And for these diseases, the timing is really visual, and it's when you first start to see the signs on the plants, on the foliage, of these diseases. And as soon as you start to see the first signs, get in there and get your first spray on. So, you know, you need to get out, be walking your fields and looking for those signs of the diseases, because one field, you know, you may have to go on Monday, but the next field may not be ready for 2 days. It just depends on how fast the crops are greening up and growing in the spring, and environmental conditions, etc. The fruit rot, it's kind of middle of the road. It's 354 mils per acre. Would have been nice if it would have matched up with one of the other ones, but this is what we have. And so for this, we're labeled to begin applications at early bloom. And again, you can make a second application of Propulse or another product that's registered 7 to 14 days later. And of course, resistance management is an issue with any and all products. And if you're going to use Propulse, the most you should do back to back is 2 sprays. And we're only registered for 2 sprays in the run of a year. And currently, the current thought process by the experts in resistance is they would rather see 2 sprays of a particular product go back to back and then move away. They think now that that's a better program than doing 1 spray, something else, and then going back to the original product again. But whichever way you do it, 2 sprays and no more than 2 back to back before you move on to another product. So that's what I had for Propulse. And as I said, just to back up for 1 second, I guess, on the Propulse, as of today, I know supply is always an issue, but based on the information I know today, we don't expect or anticipate any supply issues with any of the products I'm going through tonight. Could always change, of course, but that's the best information I have today. So moving on to Proline. Many of you are familiar with Proline. We've had Proline in the wild blueberry market for a number of years, and Proline continues to be, if not even more so, a key product in many fungicide programs because we're losing other products that used to be in there very frequently, whether it's through loss of registration or new MRL restrictions. So Proline is probably becoming more important, and the product I just talked about, Propulse, is probably going to fill some key niches as well. So Proline, of course, we get more fruit set with Proline, better yields, bigger berries, and many of you have seen this in your own fields, the untreated versus treated with Proline, just a much better crop. So as I touched on earlier, Proline is a single active, it's prothioconazole, and it's a group 3. Same formulation we've had since we launched it, and still a 5.1 liter jug. This product is registered in both the sprout and the fruiting year, and very effective cost-wise, so economical management of diseases. Foliar application, it is broad spectrum and systemic. And as I said, it's turning into one of the key products as a blueberry fungicide. So the Proline label has blueberry rust, septoria, valdincinia, and monolinea on the label. We see increased numbers of floral buds when we use Proline. And as I mentioned, increased fruit yield and size, etc. So application timing for the septoria and the rust and valdincinia is virtually identical to what we discussed with the Propulse. And you basically have to get out into the fields and look for the first signs of the disease on the foliage. And as soon as you see that, get out there and get your first spray on. And then if necessary or needed, you've got 10 to 14 days for a follow-up. And for monolinea, applications at early bloom, and the same type of thing. If you need a second follow-up spray, go in at the 5 to 10 days later. And we do still recommend with Proline that you use Agro-K or AgSerf. It's not going to be a make or break if you don't use it, but we do consistently see, a few percentage points improvement in control when those products are added in there. We don't recommend it with the Propulse that I spoke about first, but with Proline, we still do. And again, there's a range of use rates on the label for the Proline, from 127 mils to 170 mils per acre, depending on the pest you're going after. And the septoria is the low rate, the 127. The leaf rust and valdincinia are at 160 mils. And then the monolinea actually has a rate range right from the 127 up to the 170 mils. So again, preventative, as soon as you see the disease, get it in there. Rain fast when dry. Again, 24-hour re-entry, 7-day pre-harvest, and as with the Propulse, a 2 application maximum. And just another picture you're all familiar with. These fields were sprayed the previous year, the sprout year, and then this was taken the following year. And on the left, you can see it untreated, and there's hardly any bloom there. But on the right-hand side, where the Proline Bravo was put down, there's just literally thousands of blooms in every square meter or square yard. So moving on to Lunar Tranquility. This is another fungicide. I should have looked it up, but I'm going to say we've had this in the blueberry market for 4 to 5 years now. And again, it's gained a very loyal following. It's a very good product, has performed very well. It is another broad spectrum fungicide with preventative and systemic properties. It is a combination, again, of 2 different groups or active ingredients. In this case, though, it's a group 7 and a group 9. And the group 7 is the same group 7 that's in Propulse, but the group 9 is a different fungicide, and it's not used in a lot of products. Group 9s aren't used a lot in general, so it makes a really good product to have in with a group 7 as a fungicide. Again, resistance management. And with this one, certainly we talk about preventative spray programs as well. So the Lunar Tranquility is registered for use against powdery mildew and botrytis. The common names are fluopyram and permethanil. This is a 500 SC formulation, and although we carry 2 jug sizes, I would say probably 99% of what we sell in the Maritimes is the 4.8 liter jug size. And for blueberries, where there is only 1 rate, that jug would do 10 acres. So for the powdery mildew and botrytis gray mold, we're looking at 486 mils per acre. Begin the applications preventatively and continue as needed for the powdery mildew. For the botrytis, again, make the first application at early flowering and then continue as needed. And we do have this registered for post-harvest botrytis control as well. And for that application, you can apply Lunar Tranquility on the day of harvest. The re-entry is 12 hours and the pre-harvest is obviously 1 day. And again, as with the previous products, the maximum you're allowed per season in this case is 1.6 liters per acre. And just 2 quick slides of some graphs. The green bar on the right shows Lunar Tranquility. And this is basically showing the number of infected flowers per stem. And you can see that Lunar Tranquility had the lowest number in this group of products. And this was work done in Nova Scotia a few years back. And the same type of thing, the same trials, looking at the yield with the Lunar Tranquility versus Scala, which is a portion of Lunar Tranquility, Kempton, and the untreated. So obviously using this in a program gave a good yield response. So those are the 3 main ones. As I said, all 3 of those are the Proline and the Lunar Tranquility have really gained quite a loyal following. And the Propulse is the new kid on the block. But the feedback that we've gotten, from research work and others is they really feel that it has a really good fit into the wild blueberry fungicide market. And I know there are some areas where growers have already said that it's going to be their go-to product of choice in the sprout year because of some of the issues they ran into last year with competitive products that were causing some damage to the foliage and whatnot. So that was really good to hear as well. So the next 3 products I'm going to touch on, I'm just going to touch on them very quick, and I'm not going into really much depth on any of them. I really just wanted to touch on a few key points with each of these. These aren't products that everybody is going to use every day, but they do have some interesting fit that I just wanted to make you aware of. So the first one is Serenade Opti. And Serenade Opti is actually a product that is, it's an organic product. It has all the organic certificates to use in that market, but probably 90 to 95% of what we sell goes into the traditional crop market. But this product, it's a foliar fungicide used against many fungal and bacteria diseases. And it's registered on just a very wide, broad number of crops. and has activity against many different things as well, botrytis being one, and bacterial spot for another. Yeah, bacterial blight, sorry. The actual product is the Bacillus subtilis, and it works in many ways, but when you break it all down, this product basically stops harmful spores from germinating. It also disrupts the growth of the germ tubes and the mycelial growth of the diseases. And in some crops, it actually forms a protective coating around roots and things like that that the diseases can't penetrate. But one of the unique things with this, and I know there's a lot of increased work being done on crops that can be produced with low or no crop residues from crop protection products. And this is one of the products they've been looking at. And because it is classed as an organic, it is exempt from requirements of residue tolerance. So it helps you meet clean food standards. And it is also exempt from it's exempt from the export requirements into other countries. So it's a product that can be used late in the season, especially without any worries about any residues being there. And this just shows you for the blueberries, we're registered for bacterial blight, botrytis gray mold, and monilinia. And the rate ranges are quite wide there. The other thing that I'll mention here is as it says at the top, these are all suppression. None of them with this type of product, you will never see control, but they do suppress diseases very well, and they work very well in combination in your spray program. And that's not specific to blueberries, but you know, as it says, it suppresses bacterial disease as well, phimosis and monilinia, botrytis. It also has activity on post-harvest storage diseases and suppresses mummyberry and different things like that. So it's an interesting product, and I know some people are starting to look at that more and more and use it. Savano Prime, switching now from fungicides into an insecticide. And the first thing I'm going to say about this, I'm going to tell you all about it, but the first thing is we've had this product registered on many crops, including blueberries, for many, many years. You haven't heard us promote it, and the main reason that we haven't in the wild blueberry market is that we are still waiting, unfortunately, for the EU to update their MRLs. Currently, they are at the default level, whereas all the other countries, whether it's North America, Japan, Taiwan, et cetera, they all have their MRLs connected with the Canadian and US one on the same level, but we're still waiting for the EU to catch up with everybody else. And we expect that will happen this fall. So that kind of limits the use if you're shipping to one of the major processors, and certainly you need to talk to them about all the products you use. But if you're shipping into the fresh market or the local market, no export, this is a product you may want to consider. And it's a group 4D insecticide. It's a very quick knockdown product. Works by contact action and ingestion. But for blueberries, it's registered for aphids and blueberry maggot. And it's a very strong blueberry maggot insecticide. And it has an excellent bee safety profile, low risk to many of the beneficial insects that we have in the blueberry fields as well. Stops feeding very quick. It can be used in rotation with other products. It is a 4D, as I said, which is different from the other group 4 products. And as I mentioned earlier, this does have translaminar activity and is xylem mobile, which means it will move up through the plant, but not down. So if you get some on a stem, it'll move out through that stem, but it won't move down, but it will move through to the underside of the leaves. So we are registered on blueberries, as I mentioned, for aphids and blueberry maggot. Re-entry is a short 12 hours, pre-harvest 3 days, and rain fast for an hour. This is another product that's a little unique in that on the label, it's actually stated that you have a minimum of 7 days between applications, which A lot of labels are just starting to get that. So that's kind of unique, and you are limited to 800 mils per acre per season if you use Savanto Prime. So I just wanted to quickly touch over that. Next year, we'll be promoting it very hard because, as I said, we expect to have the EU catch up with everybody else on the MRLs by this fall, and then we know it'll be very well suited to get into this market. And the final product, very quickly, just wanted to remind everybody about option. And as you can see, I still use my slides from Gavin Graham in New Brunswick. He was always gracious enough to allow me to use his slides. But I just wanted to remind you that if you're using option herbicide for grass control, there is only one rate on the label, and it's the 1.56 liters per hectare. And based on the jug size, that will do 10 acres out of a jug. And it is very important that you use the liquid UAN. As you'll see in a slide in a minute, it just makes a world of difference in the performance of this product. So do not leave that out. Only registered for the sprout year. Excellent crop tolerance. We've never seen any issues with flower bud reductions or yield reductions or any crop damage or anything like that. So we're good there. And this shows you what will happen if you don't put the UAN in. On the left, you know, it was 13% control, and on the right, you were looking at 75% control. So the UAN is vitally important with this product. The other thing, as with most herbicides, timing is very important. And the dates that you see in the middle here, those dates were probably only the correct dates for that one particular year. But the important thing is the pictures at the top show what the grasses were like on these dates. And then the picture below it shows what the same plot was in July after, well, basically 2 months later. So the first picture, there's just not enough green matter here from the grasses germinating and growing. This is too early to apply. If you did it then, you're probably going to get good control of what's there, but you're going to have grasses re-emerging afterwards. These next two slides are kind of the sweet spot. You've got lots of green matter here. The weed is actively growing, hasn't started to harden off or go to seed or anything like that. But if you wait too long, if the grasses are starting to harden off, starting to form seed, or if they've already started to drop seed, you're way, way past when you should be spraying the option. So again, you know, you need to walk your fields, and you may have some fields that this year you can go out and spray on the 18th, but maybe it'll be the 20th, or maybe it'll be the 25th, and different fields may need different timing. So remember, you need the UAN, sprout fields only, and proper timing. And with the option, I would say as well, with most of my products, you should be looking at no less than 20 gallons per acre with the water. And that's it. So if there's a few questions, I'll try to answer them. I'll stop sharing here. Certainly just want to say we appreciate the business from all of you, including the True Agri-Mart and all you growers out there. And certainly hope that everybody has a great season in 2021, and that everyone stays safe and healthy as well. It's perhaps the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Graham. We appreciate you being here tonight as well. So the first question I have for you is, what is the cost per acre for Propulse compared to Proline?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on what you're going after, and that's why I suggested perhaps you should focus the Propulse on monilinia. If you're going after monilinia, it's going to be probably, and these are ballparks, folks, based on our suggested retail, it's probably going to be $5 an acre more than Proline for a monilinia spray. But it varies quite a bit because the rate range is quite wide as well. But really, to get good pricing, you should talk to your sales reps at the Agri-Mart.
That's about right. I don't know. Does anyone else have any questions for Graham while we have him here?
Well, if not, that's fine. They can all get a hold of you folks at the Agri-Mart, and you can give me a shout or fire me a text or whatever in the next day or two, and
Yeah, for sure.
we can get back to you if there's no others tonight.
Yep, that sounds great. Anyone with any questions, just let me or Terry know, or anyone at the Agri-Mart, and we'll get a hold of Graham.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone. And as I said, have a great season.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
All right, so our last speaker tonight is Dave Essery from UAP Canada. And he's talking with on some solutions for wild blueberry production challenges. So I'll welcome Dave Essery.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. Hopefully everybody can hear me well.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, fine. Again, thank you, and thank you to the Agri-Mart for allowing me some time this evening to go over some of our products. And if I hit share screen, I should have my screen up. Is that correct? I'm used to Teams, by the way, not Zoom. So.
No, I think you still have to hit the green share screen button.
Yeah. And this one.
Okay, we're making progress.
I think we're getting there.
Yep, I can see it now.
Okay, so thank you very much again. Like Megan said, my name is Dave Essery and I work for UAP Canada, and I live in Prince Edward Island. A little bit about UAP. UAP is a division of Nutrien, which is a company that was formed when Agrium and Potash Corp merged a few years ago. Nutrien Ag Solutions is the retail division of Nutrien, and they do have about 300 retail locations in Western Canada, mainly Manitoba West. UAP is the wholesale crop protection and specialty products division. Our head offices are for Nutrien in Calgary and Saskatoon, and for UAP, myself, Dorchester, Ontario, although I work from home. We do have a warehouse in just outside of Montreal in Coteau-du-Lac, and we also use New Denmark Trucking in New Brunswick as a warehouse, as a local warehouse. In the east, there's Willie Gubbles is my boss. Then there's myself, and my counterpart in New Brunswick is Dave Bell. UAP, just for your information, is a product management company. We do operate coast to coast. We are wholesale only, and we do sell to dealers, but I do spend a lot of my time, as does my counterpart in Brunswick, Dave, talking with growers, spending time with growers, walking fields, whatever's required. So some of the major partners that we deal with, Loveland Products, that's an internal company, a company called SIPCAM, United Phosphorus, Gowan, FMC, Sharda, Arista, TKI, AMBAC, and others. First product I want to speak of, it's nothing new, but it's our version of chlorthalonil. It's called Echo Fungicide. We've probably had this product, I would say, ongoing for the past, I would say 10 years or more. And it is a chlorthalonil product. I just want to throw this next slide up. This is the decision from 2018 from PMRA. There were label amendments which didn't necessarily affect blueberries all that greatly. So you still have 2 applications available in the sprout year, no additional worker exposure provisions. And the DF formulation did change this year for the upcoming year, and it must be packaged in water-soluble packaging. So that's a change for us. So we do have a liquid formulation. It's called, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You're on, I think you're not on the the
Sorry?
presentation screen so we can see the next slide. I just didn't know if you wanted it to be that way or not.
Oh, okay. Well, oh, the next one is showing up there. Yeah.
It's no big deal. I can see it okay. I just thought I'd let you know.
As long as everybody can see the first one, that's fine by me. No problem.
All right, we're good then.
Okay. Again, Echo NP is the liquid formulation that we have. It's a 720 product. It used to be called Echo 720. The reason it's called Echo NP now is because NP stands for not on potatoes, because it's not a closed system. So on potato production, it has to be either in our DF formulation or in one of our totes. So we do have 450 and 984 liter totes available, just for your information. So on blueberries, nothing really new here. Sprout ear diseases, septoria, rust, valdincinia. You make an application in early to mid-June and a second in August. So this would compete with Bravo 500, but again, 720 formulation, so more concentrated. This slide just kind of brings that up a little bit. If you were basing your Bravo application, for example, on 2 liters per acre, a tote of our Echo in a 450 liter tote would treat 326 acres, the equivalent. A case would treat 14, and a 10 kg bag would treat 9 acres. And the thing in the DF formulation, the 10 kg bag is now 20 by 500 gram packages, Solupacks in the bag. So that is a change. Some additional information, it is rain fast when dry. We would like you to avoid fine sprays. We'd like to see them in the 150 to 2 micron range. Very compatible. And it is a protectant. So again, not a systemic, but a protectant fungicide. And just to give you an idea what that 100 to 250 looks like, if you look there under fine drizzle, that's the size, from fog at up to 20 and thunderstorm up to 1,000 or more. And that is Echo with Durashield. I have a couple of products with propiconazole. As you know, the European Commission has declared a withdrawal for this product. There was a grace period up to last year and maybe going forward, and you'll have to check with your processor. This is an option for you for a fungicide. We have a new brand this year. We normally carry Bumper, and this is basically the same formulation. It's called Princeton 418 EC. So it's propiconazole. The diseases are monolinea. On Lowbush, this rate's 300 mils per hectare, so a lower rate than, say, a less concentrated product. First application when flower bud scales first appear, and second 10 days later. Important to know that there's only 2 apps allowed per year, and there is a 60-day PHI. Basically, rain fast in an hour. We recommend a 110 flat fan with no finer than 50 mesh screens. It's very highly compatible, and that's preventative. And again, PHI is 60 days. We do carry a formulation, another product called Propi Super. This would be more similar to, say, a Tilt. It's propiconazole again. It's a 250 gram per liter application. So, sorry, concentration. All the other rules apply. A little higher use rate. And again, 200 liters of water per hectare. As many people have mentioned, water volume is important, in particular with fungicides. Another product that we carry, and we've only carried this, this is maybe our 3rd year, is called Purolid. So it's a chlorpyrrolid, and it's a herbicide, and it is for mainly tufted vetch in blueberries, as you can see. This is basically similar to or the same as Lawn Trail the only difference being the concentration. So this is a 300 compared to, I believe, Lontrell's might be a 480. So you can use this for spot applications, one application only in a non-bearing year, apply in June, and it may cause crop damage, so be careful. And the PHI in this product is 10 months. High bush blueberries, just to throw this up, again, one application per year. It's for post-emergent control of vetch and red clover and white clover. And the 0.504 to 996 liters, quite a range in rates. PHI in high bush is 45 days. The next slide is courtesy of Scott White. This is some work I believe that he done several years ago now. The product Lontrell is a clopyralid product that will be compared to all the others on that list. And in this situation, it did prove to be quite favorable when you look at the initial density compared to the final shoot densities there. Again, just to let you know that this Lontrell and clopyralid and puralid are the same thing. New, I think, just last year is a product of ours. It's called Mester 480SC. It's mesotrione 480. It's exactly the same as Callisto. It does come in a slightly different case, I believe. It's 3 times 1.7 liters, so a total of 5.1 liters in a case. And the rates are basically the same. 0.3 liters per hectare for lamb's quarters and pigweeds, velvet leaf, wild mustard. And you can go, that's pre-emergent or post-emergent to the weeds. If you are going post-emergent, they do recommend the use of Agro-90, for example, at a 0.2% volume per volume. So about 2 liters per thousand. I'm not going to say a lot more about this product. It is available, and like I say, it's similar to same as Callisto. I guess the thing is we don't advertise a lot of our products, so economics may come into play here. So you can check with the Agro-Mart for pricing. Another product of ours, Aceta 70WP. Basically the exact same AI and concentration as a sale, and registered on low and high bush blueberries for maggot. You can use the high rates when populations are higher or dense, or vegetation is more dense. Do not apply more than once every 12 days. And do not apply less than 7 days before harvest. Observe a 7-day PHI and don't apply during bloom. And the REI in this product is 12 hours for high bush and low bush blueberries. So again, another product of ours, similar to a product that's already on the market. I believe we're probably the only company now that has malathion. Malathion 85E is our product, and on the label now, it has suppression of spotted winged Drosophila, one rate only, 1 liter per hectare, a PHI of a day, an REI of 12 hours. I'm not going to say a lot more about that, but it is still available. We also have a product called Propulse, 2.5 EC, registered on Lowbush again for leaf tires and spanworm. You see the water volume there, at least 1 to 200 liters of water, and do not apply within 14 days of harvest. The active is deltamethrin, so it's a 250 gram per liter, similar to a product called Desis, just slightly less concentrated, although the jug size at 300 mils per hectare, our jug would treat 40 acres. So another option for a product that's already on the market. I know Rick talked a little bit about this product, and I know it was mentioned a couple of times. The LI 700 is our product. So LI 700 helps you maximize your spray performance. It is a Lecitech product, so it's produced with lecithin. We have two products in this class. One is called LI 700, the other is Liberate. The biggest difference between those two products is LI 700 is also a acidifier compared to everything else that's on the Liberate label. So I mentioned it's Lecitech, it's soybean oil derived, it's low foaming, and it is manufactured by our sister company, Loveland Products. Several reasons to use this product. First of all, droplet size management. You don't want your droplets too big or too small. You want ideal coverage. You want uniform deposition. It also helps to penetrate, cut the cuticle, and again, a pH adjuster, so it makes your sprays more effective. It is a non-ionic surfactant. That cost at approximately 65 cents per 100 liter water. That's probably an old slide, but it hasn't really changed a whole lot in the past several years. There are times when you may not want to use a product like LI 700. Some products do require a higher pH, sulfonylureas, coppers. A couple of examples of a sulfonylurea like Ultim or Spartan. So they may prefer to have the higher pH as opposed to some of the other products that require mainly insecticides that like a lower pH. Similar to what Rick said, fill your sprayer tank with about 75%, 2/3 to 3/4, agitate. Now in this case, it says add the LI 700 first and then the pesticide. And I think that works if you're simply putting in one pesticide. That probably does the trick. If you're putting in a whole bunch of products, you may want to take it to the point, or maybe even have to adjust it after you have already added some. So anyway, put the product in and get it down, get the pH down first. I don't know if you know what your pH is in your water. I know in Prince Edward Island, we've done some testing here, and a lot of the water runs between 7.5 and 7.8. 7 is neutral. Rick talked about half-life, so it's the period of time that it takes for half the amount of pesticide to degrade in water. So 50% effective, and the wrong pH reduces product strength. A good example of this is product Dimidan. You'll see at a pH of around a little over 8 there, the half-life is just over a half hour, probably 45 minutes. If you reduce the pH down to 5, the half-life increases to 178 hours. So to maximize your spray performance, apply the recommended water volume, and contact pesticides do require more thorough coverage and more so than systemic. So it's really important that contacts be in touch in the spots that you want them to be. I mentioned Liberate, again, similar to LI with the exception that it does not affect pH. One other product I want to mention, All Clear. This is our tank cleaner, spray tank decontaminator. So it's easy to use liquid, it's economical. Use rates somewhere between 250 and 500 mils per 100 gallons. The best time to do this is right after spraying. You probably want to be doing this when you're shifting from, say, a fungicide to a herbicide, or a herbicide back to a fungicide. Probably more so from a herbicide to a fungicide. Some of the key features of this product: it's unique, it's ammonia-free, it has a lower pH, and it's non-corrosive, so it is safe on equipment. It's a liquid formulation, and it's low foam. Some tank cleaners can foam up when you try to use them. And it does, no pesticide is too sticky. And basically the rinsates are safe to the crop. And why use the tank cleaner? So most cases, simple flushing doesn't do the trick. Residue following herbicide use, including sulfonylureas, for example, can cause damage to susceptible crops or turf. And this also prevents sticky residues and pesticides from binding to your spray equipment and building up. And it would help extend your equipment life. The all clear difference, again, ammonia-free, liquid, and economical. And generally speaking, the rinsate, the residues of all clear, generally harmless to the crop. Some tank cleaners alone can cause direct damage to the crop. And if you're not sure, test a small spot first, just to make sure. And when we evaluated this compared to 20 other tank cleaners, we were at least equal to or better than all the other cleaners. Good general cleaning, and it helps with difficult deposits. And highly effective tank cleaner, dual mode of action. Again, the hard to remove products like the triazoles, phenoxy, sulfonylureas, and probably one of the only ones that would remove carfentrazone, and extensively testing. I believe this is always on hand at Truro Agri-Mart. And I went through that quite quickly, but I know everybody wants to log in, maybe watch a game or something. So that's all I have. If you have any questions for me, you can please go ahead. And if not, you can contact me at my email address. It's dave.essery@uap.ca. And our website, uap.ca, very easy to navigate. And that's all I had. So if there's anything, I can certainly try to answer some questions.
Great, thank you, Dave. There are a couple questions here. And we do carry all clear tank cleaner for anyone that was wondering that. So the first question, how does the price of, he has Mester, not sure, compare with Callisto?
Nestor should be at least as economical, if not quite a bit more so than Callisto. I don't have a Callisto price. I would suggest that you could have a talk with Terry and he can bring you up to speed, but we try to design it so that it's certainly an economical option. I don't have the exact number.
I have $13 per acre for Callisto. That was last year's price.
Okay.
Okay, and the next question, are there any sprays that tank cleaner is not effective against? I guess that might be
I don't think, I mean, there was 35 or so different sprays that they tried it on, and no, I think it decontaminates most. It's really good on glyphosate. It's good on some of those sulfonylureas, phenoxys. So generally speaking, anything that certainly a blueberry grower would be using, I don't think there'd be any issue.
Perfect. Anyone else have any questions for Dave? I don't think I see any. So thank you very much, Dave, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So on that note, I've got some door prize draws that we made, and I'll make everybody aware who those individuals were tonight. So Dave Essery donated 3 UAP shirts that he'll send up to us here at some point. And the winners of those were Gordon MacArthur, Jeremy Gilbert, and Rob McMillan. Blair donated some gift certificates. The winners of those were Michael Hodgson for $75, Alan McCaddy for $75, and Ed Davidson for $50. BASF donated 2 $75 ones, Greg Smith and Bill McKay. So the way those gift certificates work is that we'll hold them here for you. They're redeemable on chemical purchases from those suppliers. And it's only cashable at the Troy Agri-Mart. And you have till November 1st of this year to use them up. On that note, I want to thank all the chemical suppliers that helped make this meeting happen tonight. So thank you to Blair, BASF, and UAP, and also to Agro-K for their presentation. So just footnote, the next sessions start on March the 9th, same time, 6:30. Hopefully you guys found this all enjoyable, and we'll be back with us next Tuesday night. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Megan, it's Dave Essery. Could you stick up that CCA thing again, please?
Yes, sure can.
I kind of missed it.
I wasn't sure if anyone on there had them, so I just stopped sharing, but you should be able to see it now.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Awesome, no worries. Okay, thanks everybody.